acquisition of it or what?
We need that, yeah.
Okay.
So we need the acquisition, good point.
Anything you can remember of how that property's been used over the years?
Well, I'll just tell you what I know. Came here
Exactly, yeah.
July 1, 1958, we purchased that piece of property. It was known then as Camp Berkshire. It was not Brodie Park South. And that was a camp that Mr. Brodie ran down to the foot of the hill, mainly for the boys. The girls had things, but they were restricted to swimming and tennis and that sort of thing. And they only came up at the top of the hill, the area we now call Brodie Park South. Well, I guess they ran around somewhat. They came up like in station wagons. We didn't have a parking problem because they bring up a load of kids, dump them off, and that's it. They were required to stay there X number of hours or something of that sort. When the time came for them to go home, they'd come up and take the kids back, and they were very happy, they were noisy, but they were happy sounds, you know, there was nothing wrong. There was no cutting of trees or bushes or anything. Everything was just kept the way it was. The only one who ever mowed up there was Ed Hale. He was sort of the manager of the area, of the camp. He did an excellent job. He worked himself to death. He owned that half. So he worked and he had his kids work, and all his kids know all about Brodie Park South, I'll tell you that. They know everything. They worked hard. And I think they've all gone now. They've all passed on. They're not here to reassure this statement is true. And then recently we had someone who was involved as a former officer of the town who insisted that we had a public golf course, and we never did. I'm sure he went up and batted a ball around, and Brodie would never care if he did or not, but that doesn't mean it was a public one. They just had this little field full of holes and tees, you know, and they played golf. And I'm sure Brodie wouldn't care who came. He wouldn't care if I went over there and did it, but I didn't. But there was never, ever, ever a public golf course there at any time. Not before I came and not now and during. And that's many, many years. That's 50 years. Okay. That's all. I really want to establish that with this other individual keeps insisting we had a public golf course. He's only trying to establish a basis for football. That's all he's doing. And we all know that. But the golf pro was a music teacher from Long Island. His name was Murray Ditzer. And he and his wife Charlotte would come up and they'd stay at the camp. They were part of the staff. They would come up and they just loved it here because this was not New York. And they would come and walk across the fields, and even Brodie would do that. He'd take his company, he had down the field there. He'd bring them up and he'd walk across the field, you know, my house, which was all right. I didn't care if he did. Show them the view and all that. Now the reason he didn't have that property is he didn't want to spend the money for it. They split the difference. This belonged to a farmer who lived, I live in his house where he established a house there. And he wanted to retire because he was out of the dairy business and he was more or less in chicken and raising heifers. And that's why he wanted to sell his property. And he had it up as one big piece. But nobody could afford one big piece, so it was never sold. And we came up and we purchased a portion of it that he charged. And he reduced the price on the piece across the street. So Brodie finally bought that because he reduced the price. I was there before he was. Now, if I was there like July 1, 1958, and I checked that today, I would say Brodie was there probably the following year or shortly after. He didn't waste any time once the prices dropped. And then he expanded his camping facilities a little bit more. And the kids did very well. And I have to say one thing, Brodie ran a very nice camp. He was very polite, and his uppermost thought was to keep it clean with the townspeople around him, the lake people. He didn't want to make any waves, you know. After all, he wanted to be decent, and he was very decent. And I saw the Marie Ditzer and his wife almost every day. They were up there all the time. I didn't care because I was working. And if they wanted to come up and sit on my porch and paint the barn, I don't mean paint the outside, they'd go with the easels, you know. Because I'd come home, there they are with their little fancy hats on, painting the scenery around here. But they were good people, you know, they just had different points of view. But I liked them, they were very nice, and I really wish they were back there today, to tell you the truth. And so that was Camp Berkshire, not Berkshire South. That all changed when other people in New Hartford had ideas, and they wanted to change this. And that was purchased when the town had a referendum, and this is where a lot of the Lake people came in. They really urged the town to buy it because they didn't want their property values to change. They couldn't see an advantage, let's say. So I think it was an overwhelmingly voted yes, the town should buy it, and they bought it. But as I understand it, at the time it was purchased with the thought that that area across the street would always be passive recreation. Many people came up, and most of the people walked their dogs there. They'd walk their dogs and they'd take hikes in the back and trails, and they had a good time. They'd bring other people. We never had this baloney that we got now. It really was well people were well behaved and very good. Nobody cut down any trees. The only time I saw a tree cut down was Brodie's mother died. She was advanced in years and she finally died. It was a big family, and they wanted to do something for her, so they planted a tree about halfway out, sort of an ornamental tree, you know, very pretty tree. And they had a big ceremony with the tree, and it was there for about a year. Then one day, it wasn't there anymore, and I didn't know that, but they came up and asked me, Brodie, and not Brodie, but the Marie Ditzer, they came over and asked me if I saw anyone do it. Well, nobody's going to cut a tree down with me looking at them, you know. So I never know who did do that, but it was sort of a mean thing to do. And they just had just the best thoughts about the place across the street. They were very nice people. And as I say, I'm sorry they're gone. And she died, and he had his sister, Dick Brodie and his sister, they probably were involved in the land deal, I don't know. She finally died too. But all the time they were there, they were very, very good people. And they made all the kids behave, and the kids really did behave. The only time they hollered when they were yelling at Hale, they'd call him old man Hale. He just laughed because he understood the kids, you know. But he had his little kids working too. All those little Hale kids grew up to be important people. But when they were little, they were out there mowing the lawns and every other thing, you know. They did a good job. They really did. And I'm sorry to see all that disappear. But that was Berkshire Camp. That's what it was called. Now today it's BS Park South, right?
Right.
It's hard for me to even say that. But that goes back from 1958 to today's date. And nothing has been sold or changed until this business, when they began, the town began cutting down trees and selling them. And a huge, huge amount of timber went up to Maine. Because I used to see the truck come all the time, and they had regular equipment to, you know, cut the trees down. Beautiful trees that probably were 100 years old, but they didn't care. They just cut them. They wanted the money. And I finally went over and talked to the fellow who's taken back to Maine. And he couldn't understand why they were selling it. He was taking it, but he really didn't understand it. You've probably seen all these big logging trucks up in Maine. Well, they would come down and take a load, and up they'd go. That's where a lot of those trees went, Brodie Park, South, whatever they call it. And other trees like across the street here, we had beautiful Norway spruce, very, very tall. And it was very nice because the wildlife used to go in there, you know, for shelter and hiding in branches, and that's all gone. Might see a tree here and there, but not very many. No matter what they said, it's all gone. And where Janet Corey lives, that was surrounded by trees too. And there's only a few of those left. They even cleaned that out. And that was a very dense place, because I used to take our dog over there and walk, so I know pretty well what was over there. But they just cleaned it out, they didn't ask anybody, the town did that, they took all the money, and it was just a commercial enterprise, that's what it was. You can call it anything you want. But now they've got this football thing going. If it wasn't football, it'd be something else. And that's why I think if we could make Brodie Park South area passive recreation, that would keep people who want to walk and hike and take their dogs out and all that. That would give them access to the property too, you know. And they should have it. I think they should. But they're just elbowed out. Nobody's got a chance. And what was it, a week or two ago, somebody from this group had their dog there. They were walking, and they were approached by some member. She said, oh, what, a 17-year-old, someone like that, told them that they couldn't walk there anymore because it's a rule. You tell me. This is what's changing. We're just twisting it into something rather undesirable. And it's a good piece of property for people who like nature and nature. But it's just not changed. So I really can't tell you anything older than that. The man who owned this property before they sold it, was a Charlie Seymour. And he built a house at the end of the property. I live in the house that he had because that was sold, that was part of the deal. I live in his house. Down at the end of the road, he built a new house for himself. And he kept raising his chickens, and in fact, he kept his brooder house on my property because it was there, and there was no reason for him to move it. And he'd come over every morning and every night to feed the chickens and water. And it was a very cooperative spirit then, you know. It was very nice. But it's not there anymore. I don't know what to tell you about that. And as a matter of fact, the reason that they had golf to begin with is Charlie told Brodie, if you want to make some money, you should make a golf course out of this. He says he was just full because he never played golf in his life. He never had time. He was a farmer. But that's where Brodie got the idea. Put in those golf things, you know. But my yard was full of golf balls all the time. I could go out and get a pail full. In fact, I had a water pail, and I just dropped them in there. I had all kinds of water bottles. But it's gone now. And you do see people over there playing golf, but they only do it because they think it was a golf course. It never was a golf course. It was just some golf holes there for his camp kids, and after the camp kids went, that was the end of that. He did try to, I know he did inquire once what it would cost to extend it and make it a big golf course, and when he found out, he just dropped the idea immediately. It was beyond his ability to pay or buy. He didn't do it. It was just a plaything for him. Poor man. Yeah, I just can't think of anything beyond that. That sort of brings it up to date, where it was and where it isn't. Why the property isn't torn down now, or let's say destroyed. They really destroyed that piece across the street. And I know because I walked around that pony with our dog. I knew all those things. And the dogs had plenty of places to sniff around and wildlife. I used to see deer all the time under those trees across the street. You don't even see one now. All that's gone. But they don't care as long as they got a football team there. It doesn't make any difference to me if it's football or basketball or baseball. It's sort of abused. I think they abuse the property. I said to the man who's cutting down all those trees and taking them up to Maine again, I said, I wouldn't even give those people a tree. They don't know what to do with it when they get it. They just don't. It's a wasted gift. That's all it was. Do you want to ask me a question?
I have a question. What other activities once the town bought it, other than taking all the trees out and so forth, what other activities changed? You know, were there different people coming in, or?
Well, the people kept coming with their dogs. Every morning when I went to work, there was cars after cars coming in with their dogs to walk them before they went to work. So it was a pretty good place for people to walk their dogs. And I would say hike. A lot of people were over there walking and hiking. It was used passively, and they did use it that way. Nothing activity, no activity there at all that would be undesirable. It was very much okay.
Can you describe what activities are there now and what it's like to live right across the street?
Well, it's not funny.
Can you describe it?
They don't go home on time, and they take their headlights and shine them on my house all the time. I don't know why they do that, but they're stupid people that do that, and I can't help that. They just think the world belongs to them, and this is their oyster, and that's it. They've been told that.
How about how much time, how noisy is it, how much time, how many nights, how many weeks?
Oh, this went on all summer, every night. And then what's more, they didn't go at sunset. They went beyond sunset. Sometimes it'd be 9:15, 9:30. They'd have their coolers. I don't know what was in them. I hope it was iced tea. And they would just stay there and just party up. It just came a party place. That's all it is. And I'm sure anybody who had a pasture at that time of the night would notice it. But I don't know why the people around the lake would even bother, because it doesn't concern them. See, if you don't live there and have your nose rubbed in it, you don't see it. I don't know. It's hard to get enthusiasm up. I can't imagine anybody deciding this really who doesn't live there. You know, they just don't care. They want to be they don't want to be involved, and that's what happens.
When you talk about the golf course, was it just literally holes in the field, and they would drive the balls to them?
But yeah, they had a
with a flag.
Yeah.
But there was tees. When I think of golf, I think of people pulling carts or driving and putting.
Oh no, there was none of that. You had to walk.
Right, you had to walk there and
yeah.
Just holes in the field.
That's all.
With some flags.
That's all.
No clubhouse or.
Mine was the clubhouse. I'd sit on my porch. No, there was no clubhouse. There was nothing laid out. As I say, they didn't even have a professional golf pro. It was my music teacher from Long Island. Of course, he knew how to play golf because he was a...
I do see some people recently there golfing or hitting golf balls, which I don't think is the same as golfing. Is that similar? They're just hitting golf balls to a tee?
Well, once in a while I see them, but I really don't sit on my porch and watch. No, they're there, and if they're there, it doesn't surprise me because I think it's their own.
Well, Dave, if you had a choice, how would you like to see that land being used?
To go back to where it was, I'd like to see it reverted so people could walk there on the trail with their animals or dogs and just be, as I say, passive recreation.
Would you want to have the grass mowed the way it is at the front there, or?
Oh, I don't care, because I don't walk there. Maybe if I walk there, I'd care, but I don't mind if it's mowed or not.
More trees, or?
I wish the trees were back, in the bushes, because they really ruined that property.
No way spruces, you said?
Oh, in the front, there was
it?
Space. And in the middle, there was another section of pines that went down and spruces. But they just took everything they could to make money.
Did Dr. Brodie plant those, or were they before him? Were they there?
Oh, they were always there.
Were they?
This has only happened, let's say, the last 8 years, 10 years, whenever our town got busy and cut everything down, And they don't know what they're doing because they really pick trees that are 100 years old. You know, they're just magnificent trees. And what are they here? You can't buy that back. That's gone. So I don't know how you prevent it from getting worse. And as someone said today, that's true. If they don't play football there, they'll do something else. But they're gonna do something because as somebody said, it's a park, but that's a park, and that's a park, you know, that's it. I don't know who said it, he said, at one of the meetings.
Yeah.
Don't bother me, I said it was a park, you know, that thing. Do you want to ask me anything, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.